This is a Film Stories original podcast.
Welcome to the Starlight Ballroom. Hey!
Hello everyone and welcome to Shipwrecked and Comatose, the Red Dwarf podcast here on the Film Stories Podcast Network. We are on the final stretch of Series 11 of Red Dwarf 11. It is time to start talking about midlife crisis and what else? And polymorphs.
That's a great start.
And polymorphs today. Over the next 2
Although
weeks.
Next week for the listeners, yeah.
Next week for the listeners, but as people already know, we record in one session because we are batshit crazy. And joining me, as you can hear there, is Colin and Mark. Mark, you've already been on the podcast with your newbie badge, but Colin, you were here.
Hello.
How are you doing? And what do you think of Red Dwarf 11?
I'm all right. It's great. I'm really enjoying it. It's, as with Series 10, it's much funnier and higher quality than I expect it to be, because it's such a step up from 7 and 8 and Back to Earth. It's good. I'm glad to be here. Glad to be aboard.
I'm glad to have you. Yes, we are now officially, as we talk, we are 66 episodes in of the main feed. I mean, obviously,
I was going to say we're a lot more than 66 episodes in, mate. We've got about 150.
Exactly. of which that isn't half of all of the episodes of Shipwrecked and Comatose.
To be fair, we did 8 on Crime Traveller and we've done 6 on Maid Marian. And we've done 1 on Coronation Street. Go team. We're not doing every episode of Corrie with Lloyd Malani in there. We're not doing that. That's not happening.
No, but the person that was on the podcast whose name I've blanked on, what was his name? Michael, his podcast does. Plug his podcast, Mark.
It's a good podcast. It's called Conversation Street. Well, it's a good podcast if you like Coronation Street. It's pretty crap if you don't like Coronation Street.
I'm very unlikely to have a listen, but if you do like Coronation Street, you should.
Yeah, they're good people.
So is Coronation Street's music still exactly the same as it was 4,000 episodes ago?
Yeah.
Coronation Street has come up in the past, not only on that podcast. We've talked about Ken Barlow being on 4,000 episodes or so. It is something that we've talked about before. And of course, Back to Earth.
Yeah.
Shall we dive into Krysis?
Yes.
Yes.
Red Dwarf 11 Krysis originally aired, depending on when you watched it, like I've been saying for most of it, either on the 14th of October on UK TV Play. That's a streaming service, Mark, by the way, just so you know. It's a streaming service.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, just checking.
I use the iPlayer, I use Netflix, and I've started using Tubi. That's actually dead good, and it's free. And it's got loads of tap films, the kind of absolute shites that I enjoy watching.
It's got a Chucky, hasn't it, on it?
It's got Child's Play 2 and Child's Play 3 at the time of recording, but not all of Chucky.
Okay. Well, this actually did air on Dave on the 20th of October 2016 as well, because they were doing like a week in advance kind of thing with the app. And this sees Kryten. Oh my God, this is going to be hard. This sees Kryten going through a midlife crisis. So, Mark, coming to the final stages of Red Dwarf 11.
I thought you were going to say final stages of life then.
I mean, someone said to me the other day, "You're not middle-aged." And I was like, I don't plan on living to 90. I'm kind of middle-aged.
Someone said I slay the other week, so I'm well chuffed.
Yeah, they were saying you're old enough to look like Santa.
Ah, okay.
If you had a big fake beard. The whole midlife thing, Robert Llewellyn was actually quite offended when they came to him with the script, until Doug Naylor pointed out that at the point they were at that stage, if that was midlife, they're doing incredibly well. Robert Llewellyn was 60 when they recorded this, so that's 120. That's pretty impressive if that's midlife.
It is, yeah. What do you make to it, Mark? Of the episodes you've seen so far, where does this kind of rate for you?
Well, first of all, it hits hard because I feel like I've had at least 3 midlife crises at this point.
How long did
so
they last?
yeah,
Though? How long did they last?
long enough.
Because
How long's he been podcasting for?
It's only 5 minutes. 25 minutes. Oh, that's all it takes.
Yeah, it's more like stuff like my obsession with Lego and tattoos and other things, Anyway, I suppose it could be worse. Could be cocaine or something.
It's probably
I
cheaper than
think
Lego.
It is cheaper than Lego. I've got a lot of friends who like Coke. Anyway, I've enjoyed most of my midlife crises. And as an episode, I think because the subject matter was something that I immediately identified with, yeah, it's one of my favorites. And I think it's deliberate that they went for a midlife crisis because the vast majority of people that will be watching it would be around our age and would be about to have their own midlife fucking crises. So I think it's a perfectly pitched episode, actually.
Where do you think it lies within 11 then? Now that you've seen 11, you've seen them 3 times at least, haven't you?
Oh, it's tough.
I mean, obviously it's like, new bias as well. We've got to bear that in mind. You haven't had time to properly have a bit of distance like I have, but where would you place it?
Well, there's not a bum episode in this season, which is weird because I was given the impression that these seasons weren't that great. But I don't think there's a bum episode. Oh, Officer Rimmer was good. I'm looking through my old notes. Give and Take. Yeah, that was also good. I like them all equally. There's me being non-committal. That's Colin the same question. He might have done some fucking thinking about this shit.
Nope. When we did the group watch of the series, that's the only time I've watched the rest of it so far because I've not had time to go back and watch the first 4. I will do, but I've watched these 2 quite a few times and not watched the previous 4 again. Absolutely loved them when we did watch them, but as I've seen these 2 episodes multiple times and the others only once, and it was a couple of months ago now.
Crichton being 3 million years as a midlife crisis, as a droid, is that a little bit pushing it for an actual thing just to shoehorn in a midlife crisis in that way?
Yeah, but who cares? And I think it's kind of cute that they clocked that he obviously spent time aboard the Nova 5. Did it need it? No. Did it matter? No. Was it fun? Yeah. Do I care? No.
This is the thing.
Continuity in Red Dwarf, wibbly wobbly, timey wimey.
There we go. That's the answer. It's Red Dwarf. In many other things, it would be, unforgivable. In Red Dwarf, it doesn't fucking matter. There's so many contradictions, and we just let it go. If it's funny, and it's funny, so that's fine.
I think it is actually funny that people made something that they thought would last 6 million years when you get an iPhone that isn't supposed to last a year before they fill it with bloatware and make you buy the next fucking expensive model.
Obviously, planned obsolescence was not part of the plan when he was built.
Well, maybe that's an ironic comment on modern life by the writers.
I don't even think they thought of it. No.
No.
His shelf life already came to an end back in The Last Day.
Oh, shit, it did, didn't it?
Yeah.
Because what's-his-face came to try and kill him.
Hudson.
Doesn't matter, does it?
But you're saying, like, so Colin, you're talking about, like, Robert Llewellyn was kind of like, I'm not happy about this, right?
Yeah.
But then he gets to be able to have a red Ferrari outfit and talk about twin exhausts and stuff like that.
Yeah, from my understanding, I think it was when he first read the script, he wasn't happy. I think he was very happy once he then carried on doing it, because he's having so much fun in this episode. When he's zooming off all around the ship, it's awesome. We'll come along to quite a few bits later on as we're talking. This is a really good Crichton episode, and he's having so much fun.
I mean, I would say that Crichton's suit was probably better than the Cat's on this occasion.
No. What's wrong with you? I've written cat suit love heart twice in my notes. Not just once, but twice. Get in the sea. It's a good outfit, but it's not a cat outfit.
I've written that about most of Lister's breakfast.
I mean, it's a classic Lister gag to start, isn't it? It's got to be a reference to nose hairs with cooking tongs that he's trying to do his toenails with garden shears. It's got to be a reference.
Yes, but they're the edge trimmer, the really long ones, and I can totally appreciate that, because if I have to bend down to do mine, it's a lot harder than it used to be. Something with really long handles that that could work. I'd probably sever most of my toes, so it might not be the best idea. But I'd be willing to give it a go.
Permanently.
True.
Lister's feet do turn up, and we get the typical bunk scene. How it all kind of progresses through to the fact that Crichton's being stupid as well, just on top of that, in which the cat appeared said, "I'm coming in."
Yeah.
I think what's actually bleak about it all is they've had 7 very boring years, and they've done the same thing for 7 years and not had very much interest in going on. And maybe that's a reference to how long it's taken them to have a new series as well.
I think it is. I think it's a direct reference.
It's kind of bleak.
They've aged during that time.
Yeah.
I was watching the behind the scenes documentary. I don't know if you've talked about this in a previous episode.
No.
Obviously, in this series, and I believe must have been in the previous one as well, Chris Barry has to wear a wig that's modelled on his old hair because he's like the 3 of us now.
Very bald.
Yes. But obviously, holograms aren't supposed to age that much, so they had to do a really good job of making a wig to look exactly like it did previously.
It's easier for Robert Llewellyn, who, like you said, is 60, but hasn't aged because of his makeup. Whereas what do you do with Chris Barry other than a wig?
They'll make use of Chris Barry's current hairline in next season, which will be something to look forward to. I'm going to look forward to that. Another interesting diversion.
So he is bald and his head does glimmer in series 12.
Potentially, yes. Potentially. Absolutely. I mean...
Oh, dear. I've watched too much fucking Red Dwarf.
You should do a podcast about it.
You should do a podcast. Pash is in the building.
Mark appears to be weightlifting with his cat currently.
This is what we're going to do with these people.
I've not got space on my desk for a Pash at the moment, and that's very sad.
Okay, have you got space for the full lister? Only for me to forget to cook it. Ugh.
I would love the full lister. It does sound very nice.
So there's 2 things that I would remove from it. So the full list for the full lister is eggs, bacon, sausages, hash browns, onions, 6 slices of white toast, double buttered on both sides with mustard, and a beer milkshake. I don't want the beer milkshake and I don't want the egg, but the rest of that sounds lovely.
Not far off me, really. I don't want the milkshake. I love the beer.
I would like to try beer milkshake just so I can say I've tried beer milkshake.
I bet it's a thing.
Let's have a look. Beer milkshake. It's just coming up with Red Dwarf Coat. Oh, no. 5 craft beer milkshake recipes to kick the heat. Oh, no. Beerandbrewing.com have got 5 beer milkshakes for you.
Why didn't you try all 5 in one night while watching Red Dwarf 12?
I believe that might be a special that Mark comes up with now.
Yeah.
I mean, I've bookmarked it.
What is the point in cleaning above eye level?
I agree.
It depends on whose eye level, because if I didn't clean, I mean, I don't clean stuff above eye level anyway, but my eye level is considerably lower than Mark's eye level, for example. If I was to only clean to my eye level, you'd be looking down on a fair bit of dust, both of you. But you would be anyway, because not my thing, really, is it?
What do you make, actually, to the fact that the crew actually come to the point of, realising that he's having a midlife crisis, that they actually work towards that? What do you think to that?
Well, they know him really well. They've been with him for, decades of actual awake time, but in reality, millions of years.
I'm glad they went for a midlife crisis, because the very early goings, when he forgot to serve lunch, I was like, oh dear, are they going with a dementia storyline here? Which could have been really dark, but they didn't. So I was glad it was a midlife crisis. And I think Colin's right that people...
They sort of did that with Holly anyway. Computer senile.
True. And they were never mean or cruel with it.
No.
Actually, thinking about it. Good point. But yeah, I think, like Colin said, it's clear that they know each other and they're playing off probably the friendships in real life as well as the friendships
Yeah.
of the characters with a storyline like this. Because, if you're in your 40s, you probably have seen your mates get a motorbike and date someone half their age.
Anthony Kiedis is doing it right now.
Who's Anthony Kiedis?
He lead singer,
Singer from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Who?
No, she's a third of his age.
The problem is, in his autobiography, he details someone being well younger than he is and then going back afterwards again after he found this out. And for some reason, people still listen to his music.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Actually, going back to the red Ferrari, what was it? DX87 Shell with twin exhausts. I've just got to say that several times over. Twin exhausts. The cat seems to enjoy himself dancing along with him as well. I know I kind of joked around the costume, but the cat and Kryten seem to be having a wonderful time.
That bit with where he's showing off the subwoofers and they're both dancing is fantastic. I could watch that for an entire episode.
Them just doing that like sort of little jig.
Is a subwoofer a thing, Colin?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a bass speaker.
So it's the bit that goes.
Yeah.
Right.
Sub bass is really low frequency bass. It's the bass that you can feel rather than
otherwise known as LFE.
Yep. Low frequency eggs.
Eggs. I know what eggs are.
It's not eggs.
Do you know what low is?
Yeah. J.K. Rowling.
Okay. This is not going well, Kurt.
I fucking hate J.K. Rowling. I hope that Khalif girl manages to get some money out of that bitch.
What that has to do about this episode, people? I do not know.
You just said low, and I thought J.K. Rowling.
The guys from the Dwarf are all concerned about Kryten. They decide to find another fleet by using the fleet finder and going into stasis, which is interesting. The fact they're just going to naturally go into stasis for some considerable time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So stuff like he's in his midlife crisis because he's supposed to last 6 million years. All right. But actively ignoring the mission to go back to Fiji, I was like, oh, have they given up on that?
I think by this point, it's less of a detour to travel off to where this ship is. It's just like popping into a town that's nearby on your way, even though they've had to go into stasis for a while. It's all relative. They're really fucking far away from Earth.
I mean, season 6, they doubled back on themselves, didn't they? They went back to the simulant ship.
They did. Well, I was trying to think because I wanted to be careful because you haven't seen Red Dwarf 12 yet. And I've been watching Red Dwarf 12 recently and there's something that happens in that. And I'm going, where else? They went back sometime. Did they go back in Red Dwarf 12? In my head, I was going, I don't know. I don't want to mess anything up. I don't want to give anything away. But it was Red Dwarf 6. But there is something which will be an interesting conversation to have next series, in relation to what we've just been talking about going back to Earth. So we'll park that for now.
Okay.
We'll park that for now. So they decide to go and find another ship using the Fleet Finder software, and it's to see if there's any other wrecks with any other mechanoids, particularly ones that are inferior as well. They need to find an inferior droid to make Kryten feel better about himself.
Like 3,000 rather than a series 4,000.
Yeah, so that's the plan.
Again, it's a bit odd. All the living people go into stasis. Do they leave Rimmer on? And does that mean that Rimmer spends a significant amount of time on his own with midlife crisis Kryten? They kind of gloss over that bit, really, don't they?
It'll be, because Kryten, would he shut himself down? And would Rimmer shut himself down and have Cat and Lister in stasis?
Rimmer's stated in the past he doesn't like being switched off.
Yeah.
It's true, yeah.
What I'm saying is spin-off. They've got like maybe 10 years where Kryten and Rimmer are just on their own. They could do like a Big Finish spin-off. Big Finish. There's an idea for you.
Oh, yeah.
The actors
Why
as
don't
well.
Big Finish do some Red Dwarf things? Why have we never said that before?
We've
You should
never
do it, Big
thought of
Finish, if you're listening.
Do you know what? We're into Red Dwarf 11 now. We've been doing this podcast for around 4 years. We're kind of repeating ourselves quite a bit. Not like the show can sometimes do. It's an interesting one, isn't it?
We'll keep repeating that until Big Finish fucking do it.
Or we get an announcement to a new Red Dwarf, which will eventually come at some point.
I mean, at time of recording, which is August, we've heard nothing other than we're going to make new Red Dwarf. We've heard nothing actually concrete. We were kind of concerned that we wouldn't get stuff like the Promised Land done before there was new Red Dwarf, but pretty sure they've gone quiet for a reason.
At this rate, the Christmas special will be the Promised Land. That's probably what'll happen. So they do decide to go to Stasis and use the fleet software to go and find a other system and another droid, in which they meet one of my favourite guest appearances of all time.
Yeah.
Butler.
He's great. Yeah. Dominic Coleman is the actor that plays Butler, who has also been in Wonka, the movie that came out last year. He's in that. He's in
Miranda.
At least the first Paddington movie. He's been in Peaky Blinders. He's been in Coronation Street, as many people have. He's also been in Death in Paradise. So that's 2 Red Dwarf cast connections already. He's been in Torchwood. He's played lots of policemen in various different things. He's got a very sort of policeman-y type face, I think. And he's also, despite the fact that, as we've already mentioned earlier, fuck J.K. Rowling, he's the voice of Arthur Weasley in all of the Harry Potter games where they didn't want to pay for the bloke that used to be in the Fast Show.
Or Peterson. You could have said Peterson.
Or him, yeah. I was blanked on him for a second, yeah. Or Peterson.
Well, I was going to say Miranda because I rewatched Miranda, not recently, but like a while back. And it suddenly dawned on me because he's a guy that keeps coming into the shop, Miranda's shop. Right. And he always gets stuck in the middle of them. He's like a gay guy who's like eventually gets married at the end of the series. But he just comes into the shop randomly one day and they keep asking him questions. And he's like, I don't know what's going on. You know what I mean? But his mannerisms in that show, it just suddenly when I was rewatching it once, I went, that's Butler. It suddenly dawned on me.
Really?
About who it was. It was great. What were your first impressions of Butler when you can you remember seeing him for the first time as a droid? He's probably one of the better looking mechanoids in the series situation as well.
Well, he's one of the only actual series 3,000 or 4,000 mechanoids we've seen. The only other one I can think of is Camille.
Yeah,
but obviously she was a space blob in disguise. I don't think I've forgotten any others. There may have been one or two.
I mean, I know we get to see the rest of the cast as mechanoids next season, but
yes, because
I can only think of Camille other than that.
Yeah, there's only Hudson, isn't there? But he was like,
no, I suppose Hudson.
Hudson's the next in line model, isn't he?
Yeah,
but he's
and obviously the original Crichton as well.
Yes, but that's Crichton. He was just recast. I really like him. I think Dominic Coleman does a brilliant job. He was obviously a fan of Red Dwarf, I believe, and he's really studied Robert Llewellyn's portrayal of Crichton because he does a very similar sort of Canadian-ish accent and does a really, really good job of it. I get full on. There are, particularly in these 2 episodes, there are a lot of sort of, I want to be more generous than saying rehashing of earlier ideas. There's a lot of callbacks and similarities to previous series and classic episodes. The one that he really reminds me of is Legion, but he's obviously a lot less malevolent than Legion because he's got all of they go in to see him and he's got all the artwork on the walls and stuff. So you almost get, and what's this? It's the light switch. So I can't buy it then. No, I needed to turn the lights on and off. Which actually Mark did when we were out on the pub crawl. We were trying to work out what this thing on the wall was, and Mark was like, that's a really nice bit of art, I think. And then we worked out it was a coat hanger.
I mean,
remember that, Mark?
Yeah. No, I was drunk.
Just so you mentioned, like using old tech, I've mentioned this before several times about this Red Dwarf 11 and 12, and you'll see a lot more of it in 12. But this season alone, just off the top of my head, Justice World tech was used in Samsara. You've got obviously Polymorph in next week, and you've got obviously, the Mechanoid stuff here. Can't think of anything else in the first episode that was kind of used. I don't think there was. And one of the things I think I said in the previous episode was that I don't think it's too bad if you're using something like Justice World tech for something else. It tells a different story and it works quite well. And I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit more next week when we talk about Polymorph, but there's elements where you can rehash stuff and it works just because it's in the universe anyway. Diva Droid is in the universe, so having a Diva Droid thing is in the universe, it makes sense.
That's it. The whole concept of Red Dwarf is the only life in the universe is on Earth. So you've only got humans creating things. All the Gelfs are originally made by humans. So all the technology is going to be made. It's a limited source. So you are going to get the same technology turning up at various different places, just like you do on Earth.
It's interesting, isn't it, that you're talking about how there is only Earth, and this was confirmed as an absolute when the universe confirmed that they'd only put intelligent life on one planet. I think that's fascinating that they absolutely stuck to their guns on that. And I really like it. I think confirming that as an absolute in this episode is weirdly important, but also very cool.
It is, but I think it was pretty much already fairly well established throughout the series. The fact that they've never met any aliens, they would have met some by now with, how many adventures they've had. There's adventures that they talk about in passing that we've not seen in episodes.
Yeah. And it's forced them, and we know we've talked about this before, but it's forced them to be a little bit more out of the box with like some vendor bar, for example. You've got to mention hot drinks and vendor bar is a perfect example of that. Or hoagie and people like that. And, there's loads of different variations of the theme with it, or doing alternative dimensions, which brings us to my next question on the thing that's interesting with this is this is almost like not necessarily dimension jump, but you could imagine this being done with Robert playing both characters and them splitting off in two different directions. You could imagine it being written like that because Butler has gone in a completely different direction to the way that Crichton did, and they both had the same circumstance, which I find fascinating that they've both done like a slightly different split. And because the whole episode is basically a reflection of Crichton, that's the whole point of it. So the fact that Butler, he's seen someone that's of lower status, but has actually achieved the thing that he wants. But then on the flip side, you'll see that flip around when he does talk to the universe about how, he seems like love is the kind of overshooting thing. So there's an interesting like juxtaposition at play between the two characters there. But I could imagine maybe in years to come, if they were to do an episode like this, you would probably have that split screen. And they've done it before with Rimmer. They've done it with
Doug Naylor loves split screen, doesn't he?
Well, there's plenty of that in our next episode.
Exactly.
But I think what's interesting about this plotline is that if you put it on paper, you would think the chasing after someone who's done worse than me plotline would be a story they would give to Rimmer. But they've given it to Crichton. I think everybody is guilty of that, even if you aren't as completely nutty contemptible as Rimmer is. I think everybody is capable of hoping that they've done better than the people that they didn't like at school. I don't particularly need to do better than people I like, but if I thought they were a cunt, I would like to do better than them. But yeah, you'd think this plotline would have been given to Rimmer rather than Crichton.
They've already done that enough with Rimmer. They've explored that kind of thing with him in Dimension Jump. Time Slides with Thicky Holden. They've already done that with his character. I'm sure they'll do it again, and it works. But I think it's nice to give that aspect to Crichton, because sometimes Crichton is a character that doesn't get built on as much as he deserves.
The way that Crichton's played in this particularly is when he kind of goes, they're probably a bit not as good as me, sir. He's almost like jovial with the idea of it. He get not excited, probably the wrong word, but he's getting that kind of like, oh, well, this is new and fresh, and it's nice to be in this position, and I'm really looking forward to see what happens here. Where it's like Rimmer's like actively looking for it. It's an external thing from the rest of the crew to make Crichton aware of his what his perceived inadequacy is, even though the crew are going, no, we'll boost his ego up here. which eventually they do, as I say at the end. But on Rimmer will actively seek that because he's seeking someone lesser than him because he wants to make himself feel good. Where it's like an internal thing with him, where it's like it's the external group that are actually going for Crichton, which is an interesting play on the same theme.
Rimmer would also manipulate things to, trip people up and make them do worse, although it'd probably, explode in his face. But he's vindictive enough, isn't he?
I think it's interesting that this is clearly a Crichton-centric episode, and the next episode is a cat-centric episode. I like that they've given characters that don't have centric episodes as often as they do. They've given them those two in this series.
Yeah. Well, going back on that twin track approach, because you've got like Crichton spending all that time looking after the skeletons. Well, I was only gone 2 minutes.
Yeah.
But Butler's kind of moved on and he's become just an expert at everything. His artistry, doctors, and like you say, like the light bulb, it says, no, I painted the painting. Oh, dear, I like the painting. Yes, I painted the painting. The way he's like sort of, he holds himself and he's gone out there, but it does have a slight tinge of still loneliness about it because he's done that because he hasn't got anyone to be with him.
And I think it's a weird kind of comparison to how people might choose to live their lives. And I guess if I'm going to put it crudely, my mum lived a lot like Crichton, and my dad lived a lot like Butler. That obviously they stayed together until my mum died, but my mum was content looking after the house, looking after her sons and her husband, and doing a bit of hobbies when she had the time. Whereas my dad was a go-getting, achieve everything in life, and he did it. It's interesting that they don't really put a value judgment on either of the life paths in this particular episode. Maybe that's why they didn't want to make it a Rimmer thing, because obviously Rimmer would very much attack Butler, which I don't feel like Crichton does. He gets upset, but ultimately doesn't attack.
He waits and he hopes that things go wrong, but he doesn't do anything to influence it himself.
So he's jealous, but not vindictive. I think perhaps if you've lived a life like Crichton's and you didn't want to live that, then you would become like that. My mum died happy. She'd lived the life she wanted to live.
Good.
And it's an interesting thing that this is a bit more subtle than it would have been if it had been a Rimmer episode. I genuinely think Crichton is much more likable than Butler. In fact, Butler's a bit of a snobby dick.
Just on that, because of the comment which came up, and I was like, it's interesting they've used that particular thing. When they say about the Butler's done a late 22nd century version of War and Peace, and Peri actually says to Rimmer, you finally get round to reading War and Peace in that episode. So Rimmer won't read War and Peace basically because it's just too hard. He's not bothered about it. Thing, but then someone like Butler has, and actually is obviously from that perspective, and he's like concertos and symphonies, and yes, and I love dining with those lot. Yes, I love it. And it feels like that he's getting his almost like a higher status version of Rimmer in that way, like you're saying. It feels like a little bit like that, but not really pushing it as hard. He does entertain the vending machines, though. So I do like the fact he does entertain the vending machines.
Yes, concertos to entertain the vending machines.
Yes.
I don't know if we're giving Crichton enough credit here, because obviously, as discussed in this, Crichton has developed a cure for hiccups.
He has.
To drink a glass of water through a straw while sticking your fingers in your ears, which sounds to me like it might work. So I'm going to try that next time I've got hiccups.
Last time I got hiccups.
I do. I was very drunk.
I don't get hiccups when I'm drunk. I fall asleep when I'm drunk.
Where was I?
So anyway, Equihecte turns up.
Equihecte. That's where I'm about to go. Yeah. But no, before we do, we get there, because Rimmer does want to bring Butler on to the ship.
He's really callous.
Yeah, he is. What a bell end.
Yeah. He's like, we'll keep Crichton around to do the dishes, but...
Yeah.
It talks about upgrading our mech like it's a mobile phone in the modern world, doesn't it?
Rather than a family member, basically.
Yeah, you wouldn't upgrade your granny.
Shall we go to?
There's a few cousins I might,
Shall we go to this moment where Equihecte shows up? Shall we talk about this?
Oh, Equihecte!
Is that you?
It's wonderful. I mean, I love it whenever there's Gelfs. I always love it when there's Gelfs. But this was a particularly fun Gelfie session.
Equihecte he was credited at the time as Robert Nairn. He's now Robert Strange, I believe. He's changed his name. He's done lots of sort of character monster suit sort of things. He's Professor Allium in Star Wars Force Awakens, and he's done various other Star Wars roles. He's been various orcs in Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power. Most recently, that I was really excited about, he was the bogeyman in the Space Babies episode of Doctor Who.
Brilliant.
Yep, he was the monster made out of bogies.
Brilliant.
Awful episode.
Oh, it was fun.
It wasn't as good as the rest of the series, but I still enjoyed it.
Oh, no, 73 Yards is one of the best episodes of
Doctor Who. That was amazing. And I went to the location where part of it was filmed the other week.
You did. It wasn't a good first couple of... No, actually, I like the Maestro one, sorry. The first one was probably... Space Babies was not a good episode. But anyway, we digress. But yeah, so the EM circuits as well break down because the Starbug's not able to handle it, which will come into play a little bit later on. Equihecte, as you say, turns up. We have the conversation, like you say, Equihecte, is that you? And then we get quite possibly one of my favourite moments of all the Red Dwarf 11. Feels to me like centuries in the making because of all the times, especially with us on Shipwrecked, where we actually have to say Gelf language in the Kinitawawi. He doesn't know the dialect to this one. Just because Crichton's so, like, always the one you turn to, and Butler, it just corrects him all the time. And
I mean, Crichton was close. It was just he hadn't quite got the...
yeah.
That joke could have gone on for 3 or 4 times the length, and I'd have still laughed. It was probably a mercy that they cut it when they did. But
it's the switch around.
Still laughing. I was still laughing.
Switch around. It was the switch around for me because obviously you get like the point where Lister's going, ma.
And then you've got Equihecte joining in as well, going, ma.
And the cat doesn't get it right. It's clear that the cat hasn't got it right, but he's just joining in anyway. It's just so good, so funny. And when you think about it, you can have all the sophisticated jokes in the world, but 6 people going, ma, is fucking funny. Ma.
But the best part of it, which makes it even funnier, is Crichton's look. When he's
so cross. He's so cross.
Oh, he's just like, go, be gone. And he comes back, ma. I always love those play on those repetitive jokes as well, where you think it's over and it's like, oh, that one final moment, which is amazing. And it also gives them an opportunity to get Butler off the ship as well and stuff. And even to the point where, if you notice, Butler's actually sitting in Crichton's chair.
Yeah.
So it's like, I mean, that's a deliberate play, isn't it? Because he's higher than Crichton is. Crichton's sitting there. He's kind of subbed himself down. You know, he's in his sad red suit. You know, it's just brilliant, and it's the one thing. A lot of things that we were waiting to watch for you to watch, but it was one of those ones where it's like, I can't wait to I see used to watch this episode and see this scene.
Yeah. I think it's important that he's still in the red suit, because when you have a really bad midlife crisis where you've made some terrible decisions, something tends to happen to knock you off your horse. And he needed to still be in the red suit for that kind of image to work. And it works really, really well, I think.
Like he'd crashed his Ferrari or something.
Exactly, like he'd crashed his Ferrari.
Subwoofers didn't work anymore.
Then we don't get the cat dancing.
No, we don't. No.
Do you know what the best cat dance was? The tap dance with Blue Midget.
No, that was fucking shit.
I loved it.
Went on
Best
way
part of
too
series one.
long.
Didn't. It was funny. We've just said how good it was that Ma went on for a long time. So
Because that was funny and
yeah, but so
worked
was
for
the
that
tap
reason.
dance was
No,
great.
no, it wasn't. It was Danny John Jules going, "Can I do a dance?"
Yeah.
And they're going,
good.
"Go on then." We've not written a decent script, so you may as well to fill up 5 fucking minutes.
Well, that's why it was
with
good,
some
because it was better
bad
than
CGI.
No, good CGI.
No, bad.
Actually, talking about CGI, CGI is pretty fucking sweet in this episode, actually.
Yeah.
Again, much, much better than I expected. I think on the tiny budget they had, it's remarkable what they've achieved with CGI. It looked great when they went to visit the universe, and
They'd
You know.
got a bit more budget, I think, than they had in Series 10, because Series 10 had done really well. So I
Okay.
think they had a little bit more freedom. Also, this series, they had a different production company. Baby Cow got on board. And because Baby Cow is so much more established, they've been doing comedy stuff since at least about the time of Red Dwarf first started. Because they're so much more established and they had the respect for Red Dwarf and knew what they could do, they did give them a little bit more leeway with things like that. Like I can't remember which episode it was. There's one of the episodes that they talked about in the behind the scenes where there was something was going to be much lower scale, and they basically suggested to them, "Why don't you just make this bigger and make it the focus of the whole episode?" And then from there, because they'd been given more freedom, were able to make one of the really good episodes in this series.
Butler does leave, and because of what we think is Butler's tinkering, that the booster circuits do actually falter because he didn't think about something, and Crichton becomes really happy about this. They end up at the Search for Intelligent Universe station, in which we're going to meet the universe.
Yes. Daniel Barker doing the voices. He's done various other voices throughout this series and the next series of Red Dwarf. He's done the lifts. The croquet commentator was him. There's a great one next week, quite briefly. He was in the Spitting Image reboot, so sort of following in the footsteps of Chris Barry. He's also been in Stath Let's Flats. But the weirdest thing that he's done, have you ever seen, the game Bop It?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. There was a version that came out about 10 or so years ago, which is called Silly Sausage, where it's this big red sausage and it does the same
Yeah, I've
sort
played
of thing.
Silly Sausage.
That's his voice.
Brilliant. I love that he's Silly Sausage.
He is the voice of the Silly Sausage toy, because I looked on IMDb and it had got appearances on the Jonathan Ross show and the Ellen show as the voice of Silly Sausage. So I was like, did they do like a weird sketch or something? So I went and found it, and I found the Jonathan Ross one, and I think it was like the Christmas special or something, and it was Jonathan Ross had got this Silly Sausage, which was the big kids toy that year, and he was getting Kylie Minogue and 3 other very, very famous people to play with this sausage thing. And he wasn't actually there, but he's credited on IMDb because it's his voice.
Brilliant. I was like, is that Morgan? Oh, it's not Morgan Freeman. But he clearly wanted to sound like Morgan Freeman for this role.
He went in and he'd got a couple of different ideas for voices to do for it. One of them was a Brian Blessed impression, and then he did a Morgan Freeman voice, and they were like, that one, go with that one. Which, because Morgan Freeman he is the stereotypical voice of God, isn't he? I think he's played God in various different films over the years.
Yeah, that's right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't like it.
Fair enough.
I don't know if it's because it's like not necessarily crossing the streams, but like, so you've got like characters in TV shows where you expect them to be one way because they're in that show. Sometimes that can work. Well, I don't know, where you see like a well-known actor and you're kind of going, oh, I know that person from such and such, but then they're in this show, and you take some of that over with you.
So you expect them to be like the character that
Yeah.
they've been in something else that you've seen them in.
Yeah, and there's actually like thesis being done on that kind of thing where it's like, and sometimes it's done deliberately. So like sort of, they'll cast somebody because they expect you to think, oh, she plays a bad guy, you know what I mean? And she could potentially be someone. But it then turns out they'll switch it around or they'll play with that preconception that you have in your brain. So
yeah, like Alan Rickman is in this action film. He's probably going to be a baddie.
Yeah. What do you call it with Jim Carrey, isn't it?
Is it Bruce Almighty?
It's not Bruce. Is it Bruce Almighty? Yeah, Bruce Almighty. What's the second one?
Evan Almighty. That hasn't got.
Yeah.
I've not seen that one.
No, I've not seen that one. I've seen the Bruce Almighty one. And I don't know if I'm fond of the crossing the streams thing. I know it's obviously not Morgan Freeman because, as we've discussed, but it's the fact that he's used that voice. I think I might have, mind you, I suppose he's not playing God, but it could have been Gordon's alive. I might have been a little bit more on board with because it's like thing. But the fact they've used something that's already happened, I'm a bit like, oh, not sure about it.
I just feel that maybe if you were going to have a Brian Blessed style voice, you should probably just employ Brian Blessed.
The problem with that is you couldn't have Brian Blessed as God because Brian Blessed is louder than God. I may have told this story before, possibly. I went to the Sci-Fi Weekender years ago. And Brian,
yes.
Yeah, okay, I won't bother then. People can go back and listen to that another time.
Just that you said, just because you said that. But re-enlighten us by all means.
Brian Blessed was there doing a Q&A thing, and it was Robert Rankin, the author, was on doing one first of all, and the PA was crap, really, really quiet, and we were sort of sitting not far from the door, and Brian Blessed came in and sort of stage whispered, still really loud than anything else, and he just sort of came over to me and went, "Bit quiet, isn't it? Fucking won't be in a minute."
You have told that story, but it's well.
I know, I love it.
Twice.
Also, you talked about crossing the streams. I went to a fancy dress party years ago, and there was someone dressed as one of the Ghostbusters. And as I was walking out of the toilet, he was just about to walk in. I was like, "Don't cross the streams."
Nice.
It amused me greatly.
Yeah, so going back to the universe, it is the weakest part of this episode for me. I understand, I kind of get what they're doing, and the joke is okay with, hey, I've been expanding exponentially, and that kind of thing, and I understand it, and I do like the concept of like, oh, well, I've been thinking, the Star Trek kind of element to it, but it just seems to slow the episode down for me.
I don't think it slows it down, because my issue with it is I think it's dealt with far too quickly. I love the set design of the ship that they've got there with a big fucking rotating thing, and then you can just see the sort of galaxy.
Yeah.
But then you've got, obviously, Crichton gives the universe a midlife crisis, which is another sort of callback, because it reminds me of the anecdote about Rimmer working for the Samaritans and causing those people to kill themselves. Somebody only phoned up because he was trying to get the football scores or something. They actually used that joke again in an episode of the British Empire.
That joke again in an episode of the 10%ers.
Did they?
Yeah.
So that's three times that was used.
Yeah.
But I think Crichton comes to a conclusion too quickly in that bit. It seems like there's massive high stakes, and then Crichton just goes, "Yeah, but what about love?" And they're like, "Yeah, fair enough." And then it's wrapped up really quickly. But I think that's because they didn't have much time left on the episode, so they couldn't have done another long scene.
No, but I don't know. It just feels like you say, it feels like the universe has come in, and that's probably why I'm saying it feels like it's the way it is, because one, it seems too grand. It's like, could it have been done a different way? Could it have been a bit more with Butler and Crichton and him coming to a realization that actually his life's not too bad. Look at Butler, or look at the way that like what Mark was saying, they don't really kind of focus on which life is better, but even like him coming to a realization, actually my life's not too bad, is it? I might not have the medical awareness, I might not be able to speak I might not be able to do that.
Ma.
I might not be able to speak like that, but my life's pretty cool. But it went like from a Series 3000 to the universe, and it just felt like it was too much. And that's just the way I feel about it. I'm not particularly fond of the universe. Full stop with it. I don't think. I think that
I don't like the universe. I think it's a bad idea. I think it should be
Yeah.
destroyed.
Yeah. And I think it felt like to me that they just wanted to get the midlife universe crisis joke out. And I did like the actual red suit it sucks line. That was good, but it just felt to me it was too much for me personally.
I think as a sci-fi concept that it isn't God, it's the universe as an entity. That is
Because
something
they're
that-
alone in a godless universe and they're out of shape and
exactly.
back.
Exactly. And I think that very good. But I think that is something that could have been explored in more detail, perhaps elsewhere, because this is still comedy. But I think it's a relatively unique and unexplored science fiction concept as far as I can tell. And I think it had potential, but you're right that to some extent it was rushed and almost brushed aside with the last 3 minutes of the show. But that being said, the last gag was a very Red Dwarf gag. However, I would have preferred it if they'd have stopped the theme tune and done it like they did. It's
Yes.
a garbage pod. It's a smegging garbage pod. They could have stopped the theme tune like 3 or 4 times with him getting more and more cross. That would have made it even better.
Yeah, because at the end, Butler admits that he actually orchestrated the whole thing and he's really good mates with the universe.
Yeah, they call him Uni.
See that? Yes, I thought the exact same thing. I was expecting it in the credits for it to interrupt it, just like Mark said. But yeah, both of us thought that. It was almost a sort of Queeg type ending as well, with the sort of pulling the rug out from under them. You
So
know,
what you're saying is Queeg shows up.
yeah, basically,
Okay.
or at least ideas based on Queeg.
Like I said, I don't want to see because I enjoy this episode, and it's weird because obviously there's a hint of Series 8 in this for me, like where there's some really high highs, but the universe seems to really knock it down a bit for me. It doesn't. There's something not there. There's something not there for me. I don't know what it is.
I think it's a rushed ending, but I
But
think
it's still funny.
it's still a really high quality episode.
It's still funny, even though it is rushed. The universe as a character has some great gags, and it all makes sense. It all wraps up, and it's
Yeah.
yeah.
I
I don't think I agree.
I think it's just the concept. I don't like the idea. I don't like the concept of that. I just think it's too much of a leap. But anyway, we are all here to have our own opinions. That's what we're here for. Any final thoughts before we finish?
Ma!
I think you hit the nail on the head that I'm still new to these episodes, and after this conversation with you, maybe this does get nudged a little bit down the pecking order for Series 11.
You're so easily influenced.
Yeah, I am, but his points were valid, and I think it's still a great episode, and way better than anything in Series 8. I'm still delighted.
Not hard.
Well, that being said, if you think about Crichton-esque episodes, really, we've had Last Day, Crichton TV, Duck Soup.
Yeah.
Is a Crichton episode, isn't it? Is any other Crichton episodes?
Brighton?
Crichton, yeah. But I just think Robert Llewellyn Crichton. That's in my head as a crew of Crichton.
Nice escape.
But, yeah. Because Robert Llewellyn is the person.
Oh, absolutely.
But it's those 4, isn't it? It's those 4 episodes. I don't think there's anything Crichton full.
I would say Camille's a Crichton-centric episode.
Oh, yeah, Camille. Yeah. Okay, so if that's everything then, thank you. Where can people find you online, Colin?
So my other podcasts, Weeding Music and Free With This Month's Issue, and also Matt's podcast, Pick a Disc, can all be found on our podcast network, which is weedingpodcasts.com. Other than that, yeah, just listen to the podcasts. We're around, but Twitter's fucking bollocks.
Correct. It is very fucking bollocks. Mark,
Twitter is bollocks, but I don't use any other social media really. And if I do, it's not related to podcastery. But at Mark Adams HC on Twitter and Instagram, where the podcast is about Chucky, you know this, at Chucky Vision on Twitter, or search for it. And indeed, all of Colin's podcasts, wherever you're listening to Shipwrecked and Comatose, it'll be there.
I am fucking everywhere at the moment.
You are.
I've got
They used to joke about me being like a massive podcast whore, and now
I've got
you're
4
a
on the
massive
go.
whore. You're a 4 whore.
A 4 whore. I have got Shipwrecked and Comatose. I've got Make It So, the Star Trek Legacy podcast. Currently, well, it'll be around about Prodigy stroke Lower Decks. I've got the X-Cast, the X-Files podcast, in which we've just done a minute-by-minute podcast on I Want to Believe, and now looking at season 10 of the X-Files. And I've got my new baby, my new Lost baby, where I am going through each episode of the TV show Lost as it celebrates its 20th anniversary. All available on Linktree, linktr.ee/rmuldrake, RMULDRAKE, and my name is Kurt. Thank you.
Minute podcast, you say? What's that?
A what?
Minute podcast, you say? What
A
are
minute
they?
podcast. Yeah, those are podcasts where you do a like the film, for example. We talked about potentially doing a minute podcast about For the Labyrinth. Ages ago. We didn't do it.
Was
So
it?
we're doing Labyrinth for Christmas and Shipwrecked and Comatose.
Was it Matt that's not seen Labyrinth? I think it was.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is worse than not seeing the last 3 series of Red Dwarf, I reckon.
Absolutely. But yes, a minute by minute podcast is where you take a film and you look at the film and you talk about each minute of the entirety of the film. You know, if you had, for example, let's argument's sake, you did JFK, why you'd want to do JFK, which is like a bloody 3.5 hour film, is another matter. But if you were doing like the Donald Sutherland scene, which takes about 5-10 minutes, you'll be talking about each single minute of that show. And each podcast would be around 15 to 20 minutes, or even 10, 15, 20 minutes each.
What a good idea.
It is an interesting idea, isn't it?
Moving on.
So until next time, where we're going to be talking about some polymorphs, it's time for us to go. Ma.
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 Ma. Ma.
Ma.
Ma.
Ma.
Ma.
Ma. Ma. Ma.
Ma.
Ma. Ma. Fucking hell. Have we got enough ma's? Shipwrecked and Comatose is a podcast brought to you by the Film Stories Podcast Network.
The show was created and produced by Mark Adams and Kurt North.
The logo was designed by Carl Bryan, and the theme tune was composed and performed by me, Colin Jackson-Brown.
I suppose I'm here as well. Matt Latham.
Follow us on Twitter at Red Dwarf Pod and follow the network on Twitter at Film Stories.
Ma.